You are the leaders in our school. You're our head girls, our captains of house, our head girls teams, and you are really welcome here. And also a huge welcome to the staff from your schools who've given up their weekend to be here and support you in what is going to be 2 very exciting days, and also to the many trust office staff and the staff from Royal High School who'll be here to make sure that everything runs smoothly. The idea of this weekend is to throw you into a situation where you'll do a lot of unfamiliar things. You'll be in a group of people who you probably haven't met before. You're going to have to work fast and creatively and under pressure. You're going to have to bond with each other. You're going to have to allocate roles quite rapidly within that group. And you're going to have to complete a task to a deadline. I hope that is going to be really challenging, but also really fun. And we hope that you make new friends and you really enjoy yourselves. And you also get a chance tomorrow to explore one of the most beautiful cities in Britain. And we're very lucky to have 4 national charities with us today. And these are going to be the charities. You're going to be divided in teams and you will be preparing a project for each of these. And they are HFT, the Eve Appeal, the Children's Society and Water Aid, and you'll find out a lot more about your chosen charity this afternoon. So, leadership. Why does it matter? Why does it matter to GDST? Partly, of course, it matters because you all have genuine leadership roles in your school. You are there to support the senior leadership team and the head. You're there to make sure that things in your school really work. And over the next year, those leadership skills will be tested. It's also the case that the 4 remarkable women who founded GDST 142 years ago also showed amazing powers of leadership. In a very male-dominated Victorian society, they decided that girls needed better education, and they pushed against the resistance. They had foresight and they were visionary, and they created the organisation that you are part of today. But 142 years is a long time ago, and we all know things weren't great for women then. But I think the thing that surprised me, and certainly when I read the booklet that we produced for our 140th anniversary 2 years ago, is that things have been very slow to get better for women. Of course, they're much, much better than they were. But in the 1970s, when I started work, it was still the case that if you were a young woman working at the Foreign Office, if you got married, you had to leave your job. And that's almost unimaginable. That feels like something that would have happened in prehistory. And although in the last 50 years we've seen a woman Prime Minister in Margaret Thatcher, we've had the first woman CEO in a FTSE 100 company, Marjorie Scardino, who I worked for, it is still the case in most walks of life, modern life, if you look at, doesn't matter if you look at politics, at academia, at law, at business, women at the top seem to get to a figure of about 20%. And then they get stuck. And obviously one of the things we really, really hope, because we're passionate about what happens to women, and particularly all of you in your future in society, is that you will see that 20% start to move up to 30 and 40%. And of course many of those leaders in that 20% are women from schools exactly like ours, or indeed from GDST. So we're trying to prepare our girls to go into a world of work which we acknowledge is still challenging for women. And certainly when I talk to young women who are perhaps making their way up in companies like Unilever or Procter & Gamble, they will say they still face challenges because of their gender. But I also want to say I acknowledge that it's difficult for young men and young women to make their way in the world of work. It's difficult for everyone. When I was your age, a little bit older and applying to university, I certainly didn't think of myself as a future leader. I was quite quiet and shy. I didn't do much in the way of public speaking, if at all. And I started as a secretary in a publishing office, wrestling with a large, unwieldy electric typewriter, and at 5:30 every evening I'd be desperately trying to type the letters and Tipp-Exing out all my mistakes while my boss said, are those letters ready yet? And I never said to myself ever, I want to be a managing director or I want to be a chief executive. I was very lucky that my first boss gave me an enormous amount of headroom and allowed me to do things that were sort of way beyond my pay grade. And throughout my career, I've been very, very lucky to have mentors and people who've supported me. And I guess what happened, because I spent almost 40 years in the world of book publishing, is after a while, I found I wasn't aspiring to be a leader, but what I was aspiring to do was to have more control over what I was doing. I wanted to choose which books we published. I wanted to choose how much we paid for them. I wanted to choose which editors we hired. And that desire to actually be, with the levers in your hand, I think was probably what drove me, slowly up the career ladder. And I think learning, most of what I learnt about managing people and management generally was from the people I worked for, because I had very good bosses, but I also had some unspeakably terrible bosses. I mean, in the 1980s, there was a breed of sort of chain-smoking, heavy drinking, extremely misogynistic people at the top of large organisations, some of whom I was unlucky enough to work for, so I knew what to avoid. As well as my career, I started a family, and I have 2 daughters and 2 stepdaughters who are all now grown up. And I often think that an awful lot of what I've learned about management, I think there is nothing like managing a crowd of small children in your family to teach you how to manage people in the workplace. It's a real education. I also feel incredibly strongly that those of you who want to have a career and have a family should feel that you absolutely can. And I hate the phrase having it all, because I feel that's just a way of saying to young women, oh, well, you have to choose. We men can have everything, but you can't. And actually you can and do. And people have lots of different routes to it. But you should never feel that in order to have a job which is really fulfilling and satisfying, you have to sacrifice the possibility of a great relationship and children and a family. Now, some of you may say, leadership, this all sounds very businessy, very corporate. I want to be a vet. I want to work for an NGO in Africa. I want to be a lawyer. What's that got to do with, I want to be a doctor? That's got nothing to do with leadership. And I want to talk about something which I think this weekend will really do in spades for you, and it's what I call performance under pressure. Because when you go into the workplace, you will find that you have to do very difficult, very challenging things, often to a time limit, often supervised by somebody who knows 10 times more about what you're doing than you do. So you think of, the young trainee barrister appearing before a really difficult judge, the young doctor going round with the consultant round, having to diagnose a patient, and the consultant watching what he or she is doing. The UN worker faced with a really difficult diplomatic challenge, the young advertising executive making a first pitch to a difficult new client. And in any worthwhile career, you are going to find yourself having to perform under pressure, having to control your nerves, to keep your brain working, and to really to be your very best in a very difficult situation. And that, I hope, is one of the things that you will experience this weekend, and you'll get to know yourself a bit better, and you'll get to really understand your leadership qualities and strengths. And when people say to me, what do leaders really need? Well, they need many, many things, but I've kind of isolated 3 qualities. And I think one is self-knowledge. And again, I think that's one of the things this weekend will help with. The better you know yourself, the better a leader you'll be, and the better you'll be able to deal with the people around you. You need to know what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. You need to know that you have weaknesses. Nobody is perfect, like it says at the end of Some Like It Hot. None of us are. So trying to be perfect isn't going to work. What you have to do is acknowledge what you're not good at, and then find people around you who are good at those things. And then you can be good at what you're good at. I think if you look at perhaps some really, notably unsuccessful leaders, like, if you look at politics, for instance, perhaps William Hague on one hand and Gordon Brown on the other, you'd say probably self-knowledge was not one of their great strengths. William Hague would never have worn that baseball hat if he'd really known himself, and Gordon Brown wouldn't have been throwing computers at his staff likewise. And being a leader is difficult. On a daily basis, you will come up against situations where there isn't a right answer, and you're going to have to manage and decide what to do. And there'll be costs, whatever you do. So the better you know yourself, the better you manage your own, perhaps vanity, perhaps irritation, perhaps anger, the better a leader you're going to be. And you'll be able to get other people to help you get the job done that you want done. I think energy is another thing. I've always noticed, if you ever meet, a leading politician, they'll exude energy. They may have just been through some massive international crisis. They'll have been 24 hours on a plane, but they bounce off ready for the next thing. It's really important to have that sort of wellspring of energy, but good leaders also know how to take care of themselves. They know they have to be fed, they have to be hydrated, they have to get enough sleep. So one of the things we're going to do this weekend is try and make sure you get, if not enough sleep, plenty of food and drink to keep you through 3 exciting days. The third thing, I think, is vision. What leaders essentially do is they know where they want to get, they say, here we are at A, and we want to get the organisation to B. And it isn't very easy, because half your colleagues will say, well, I don't want to go to B, I'd rather go to C. Or why do we have to go anywhere? Anyway, it's so tiring and we all hate change. So what the leader has to do is paint a picture of B that is so appealing, so enticing, that your colleagues will say, even though it's a real pain getting there, we can see that the price is worth it. And the vision is the thing that enables you to do that. And this weekend, your vision for your client could be the winning proposal that makes you the winning team, gets you to your destination. One of the things, I took part yesterday in a seminar about values in organisations, and one of the things that I think there is a lot of evidence is that values really enable organisations to be more effective, to grow faster, to engage their employees. And we over the last 2 years, we've worked on 4 values for GDST, one of which is girls first, which means you come first and your interests always come before everything else. Networked, because we are an amazing network of 26 schools, 24 schools and 2 academies. And I think one of the things you'll find today is you'll be in a team with people from all over the country. And I can guarantee by the end of Sunday, you will have new friends that you've never knew you would have. Bold, because we don't want to be quiet, compliant, goody-goody. We want to be out there, innovative and brave. And principled, because we want to do the right thing. And that's what good, there are plenty of examples, as you see in the press, of organisations who are not doing the right thing. We want GDST always to be doing the principled thing. So there's those, and then you also know our 4 C's, which we want all of you to be, which is confident, courageous, committed and composed. There'll be plenty of opportunity for displaying those qualities, especially as the deadline of tomorrow evening approaches and you suddenly realise that your computer's gone down or you haven't edited your film. So all of you will be practicing performing under pressure. It's like being in one of those space games where the aliens keep coming at you and you have to keep shooting them down. But that is what leadership is all about.